My parents ignored me for years, but worshipped my sister. Now she's bankrupt, and they need me to fix the life they chose over mine. I'm a 29-year-old guy, and I've always known I was second place in my own family. That's not something I realized all at once. It was like a slow drip over the years, each drop carving out a hollow space inside me. Growing up, I watched my parents light up for my sister, Claire, like she was the sun, and they were just orbiting around her glow. Every school play, every piano recital, every mediocre A-, those moments were treated like miracles. Meanwhile, when I came home holding an art trophy or a straight-A report card, my mom would just smile politely and say, "That's nice, honey." Before turning back to talk about Claire's next big thing, I used to sit in the front row at her recitals, clapping so hard my palms stung while no one ever showed up for mine. Once, I remember asking my dad if he could come to my school's art exhibition. He said he'd try, but Claire's got that big competition the same day, son. He never showed. I ended up walking home that evening under the streetlights, carrying my ribbon in a paper bag, telling myself it didn't matter. But it did. It always did. At home, the walls were covered with framed photos of Claire holding trophies, shaking hands, standing in front of banners that said, "Excellence Award." There wasn't a single picture of me doing something I was proud of. I used to wonder if they even saw me as their son, or just the extra child who came with the package. Looking back, it wasn't even the lack of praise that hurt. It was how normal it became. The way I learned to celebrate quietly, to hide my joy because it felt selfish. The way I started believing love was something you had to earn by being extraordinary. But I was never extraordinary. Not in their eyes. And that belief, it would shape every decision I made from that point on. By the time Claire and I were teenagers, the favoritism wasn't subtle anymore. It was the air we breathed. My parents built their entire lives around her achievements. She went to a private prep school, got her own car at 18, and never once had to worry about money. When I asked if I could join a summer art program that cost a few $100s, my dad laughed and said, "We can't waste money on hobbies, son. Focus on something practical." I remember one dinner where my mom couldn't stop talking about Claire's new leadership award. "She's just destined for greatness," she said, glowing with pride. I tried to share that I'd been offered a part-time job at a local gallery, a huge deal for me, but she barely looked up from her plate. My dad just muttered, "Good, maybe now you'll learn some responsibility." Claire smiled, that polite little smirk that said, "I win again." Even the holidays revolved around her. One Christmas, my parents surprised her with a brand new laptop for college prep. I got a clearance hoodie and a lecture about saving money. They said they loved us both equally, but love shouldn't feel like comparison charts. I started noticing the way they talked about me to others, like I was a footnote. "Claire's brother," they'd say, or "he's doing his thing." I didn't even have a name in their stories anymore. Just a placeholder. The worst part was how easily I accepted it. I convinced myself that if I just worked harder, they'd see me too. I started taking extra shifts, paying my own tuition, and sending them small gifts on their birthdays, tokens of the love I kept trying to earn. But no matter what I did, Claire was always the headline, and I was the background noise. And every time they looked at her with pride, a part of me learned to disappear just a little more. Still, I kept waiting, foolishly, for the day they'd finally notice me. That day never came. When I turned 20, I finally realized that waiting for their approval was like shouting into a void. Nothing ever came back, so I packed my bags and left home. It wasn't some dramatic, screaming departure, just a quiet walk out. The door, after another dinner where my parents spent an hour debating which grad school Claire should attend, while ignoring the fact that I just told them I got promoted at work. My dad didn't even look up from his plate when I said, "I think I'm moving out." He just said, "Make sure you can afford it." I moved into a one-bedroom apartment above a repair shop where I worked full-time. The air smelled faintly of oil and metal, and at night the sound of passing trains would rattle the walls. But it was mine. For the first time, I felt a strange kind of peace. No comparison, no condescending smiles, just silence and the space to exist as I was. At first, I still called home every week, Every conversation started the same. "How's Claire doing?" "She just got another scholarship." "That's great," I'd say, pretending to care while my chest tightened. When I mentioned my own life, new clients, promotions, anything, they'd respond with polite nods before steering the talk back to her. The final straw came a year later, on my 21st birthday. I got an email from my dad. Not a call, not a message. Just a link to an article about Claire's company being featured in a local magazine. No "happy birthday," no "how are you," just pride in her. That night, I sat on my couch staring at the email until the screen blurred. Something inside me broke quietly like a thread snapping. I realized I could spend my whole life trying to be seen by people who never would. So I stopped calling, stopped visiting, stopped hoping, and for a while, silence was the only thing that didn't hurt. The silence stretched into years, and honestly, it was both painful and freeing. I learned how to build a life without being anyone's afterthought. I got a better job at a local firm, started saving steadily, and for the first time I felt proud of myself. Not because someone else said so, but because I earned it. My apartment transformed from a bare space with thrift furniture into something warm. A couple of plants on the windowsill, my own paintings hanging on the walls. It was quiet, yes, but it was mine. I didn't hear much from my family during that time, but news about them found me anyway. Mutual acquaintances from high school would mention Claire in passing. "You must be so proud of your sister. She's doing amazing," they'd say. I'd just smile and nod. Apparently, her startup had taken off. Photos of her smiling beside my parents were all over social media. New house, new car, interviews about her family-supported success. It was like they'd built an entire empire around her name, and I was erased from the narrative. Every so often, I'd scroll through those posts late at night. My mom's captions were always the same. "So proud of our daughter. Hard work pays off." My name was never there. I wasn't angry, at least that's what I told myself. I just felt numb. Still, sometimes I'd think back to those childhood dinners, the way my parents' eyes would light up for Claire. It used to make me ache. Now it just made me tired. I didn't expect anything from them anymore. Not love, not recognition, not even an apology. I thought I was done with that chapter, until the universe decided to remind me that even when you close a door, some ghosts still know how to knock. It started with a phone call from a number I didn't recognize. I let it go to voicemail expecting a scammer, but when I listened, I froze. It was my father's voice, strained, hesitant. "Hey, son. Just checking in. It's been a while. Hope you're doing well." That was it. No real message, no reason, just an awkward bridge after years of silence. For a moment, I thought maybe he was sick, but deep down, something told me it wasn't about me. It was about them. A few days later, I ran into an old neighbor at the grocery store. She looked surprised to see me and said, "You heard about your sister, right? Tough luck with her company." My stomach dropped. She went on about how the business had been having issues, how people were whispering about bad investments and unpaid debts. I didn't say much, just nodded, but my mind was racing. That night, curiosity got the best of me. I searched her company online. The posts that once overflowed with celebration were gone. Her social media was wiped clean. And then I saw it, a local article about a startup under investigation for financial mismanagement. No names were mentioned, but the timeline matched Claire's business perfectly. 2 days later, I got a text. From Claire, "Hey, I know it's been a while. Can we talk? Please." It felt surreal reading her name on my screen after nearly a decade of silence. My first instinct was to ignore it, to protect the fragile peace I'd built. But curiosity, that dangerous human weakness, kept gnawing at me. She called the next day before I could block her. Her voice cracked as soon as I answered. "I really need your help," she said. "Please don't hang up." And in that moment I realized something was crumbling in their perfect world. The same world they built without me. When I agreed to meet Claire, I told myself it was just to hear her out. Closure, nothing more. But when she walked into that cafe, I almost didn't recognize her. The confident, glamorous sister who used to turn every room into her stage now looked small. Her once perfectly styled hair was tied up messily. Her hands trembled as she clutched a chipped coffee cup. She smiled weakly. "Hey, stranger," she said, but her voice cracked halfway through. The silence between us was heavy. Finally, she blurted, "I messed up. Everything's gone." She told me the truth in fragments. The company had been losing money for over a year. A business partner, someone she called a family friend, had drained their accounts and vanished. My parents had poured their entire retirement savings into her dream, convinced she was untouchable. Now, she was bankrupt, they were broke, and everything they built, the house, the cars, the legacy, was collapsing. I listened without saying a word. Part of me wanted to scream, "You did this to yourself." Another part, the one that still carried a wounded son's heart, just felt numb. "I don't know what to do," she whispered. "Mom and Dad, they're terrified. We might lose the house next month. You're the only one doing okay." Those words hit harder than I expected. The irony was cruel. The family that spent decades pretending I didn't exist was now turning to me for salvation. She looked at me, eyes red, voice trembling. "Can you please talk to Dad? He listens to you." I almost laughed. Listens to me? He hasn't listened to me a day in his life. Claire flinched, tears pooling. I could tell she wasn't used to hearing no. As I watched her break down, a strange feeling twisted inside me, something between justice and pity. For the first time, I wasn't the one falling apart. They were, and I wasn't sure if that made me feel powerful or empty. A week later, I came home from work to find my parents standing outside my apartment door. I froze in the hallway, almost convinced I was hallucinating. My mom's eyes were puffy and red, her makeup smeared. My dad, who I hadn't seen in nearly a decade, looked smaller, older, as if the years had finally caught up with him. He gave me a stiff nod. "Hey, son," he said like we'd just seen each other yesterday. I let them in, mostly out of shock. The smell of cheap perfume and cigarette smoke filled the small space, clashing with the scent of fresh paint I'd applied just weeks ago. They sat awkwardly on my couch, glancing around like tourists in a foreign country. For a minute, no one spoke. Then my mom started to cry. "We didn't know where else to go," she said softly. "Claire told us she talked to you." My dad cleared his throat. "We're in a bad spot. The business failed, the mortgage is behind, and we might lose the house." His tone wavered between pride and desperation. "We just need some help getting back on our feet. You've always been good with money, right?" It was surreal. The same man who once called my dreams a waste of time was now asking me for help. I asked, "What about Claire?" "She's trying," my mom said quickly, "but she's overwhelmed. We thought maybe you could loan us something, just until things stabilize." Her voice cracked on loan. I realized then they weren't here for reconciliation. They were here for rescue. I stared at the floor, trying to process it all. Years of neglect, emotional abandonment, and now they wanted me to save them. "I don't think I can do that," I said quietly. My mom's tears stopped instantly, replaced by disbelief. "After everything we've done for you." And in that moment, I saw it clearly. The manipulation, the guilt, the same emotional trap I grew up in. Only this time, I wasn't a boy anymore. A few days after they left my apartment, I convinced myself it was over, that they'd move on, find someone else to lean on. But guilt is a stubborn thing. It gnawed at me, whispering, "Maybe you're being cruel," until I finally caved. I drove to their place, well, what used to be their place. The moment I pulled into the cracked driveway of a small, weather-beaten rental home, my chest tightened. Gone was the grand two-story house where I'd grown up invisible. This new place looked temporary, like a bad decision you could never quite fix. When my mom opened the door, she looked startled, then hopeful. "You came," she breathed, wiping her eyes. The living room was cluttered with half-packed boxes, unpaid bills scattered across the table. My dad sat in an armchair, staring at a muted TV, his face gray and distant. Claire was there too, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to notice me. "Nice place," I said quietly, though it wasn't. The silence that followed felt heavy, suffocating. My mom tried to play the victim, talking about how unfair life had been, how they'd been taken advantage of. My dad muttered about bad investments, about trusting the wrong people. And then Claire looked up, her voice sharper than I expected. "You could help fix this, you know. You have a good job, some savings. It wouldn't even hurt you." That's when I realized the truth. They didn't see me as family. I was a tool, a means to an end. "Why me?" I asked, my voice low. "Because you're desperate now?" Claire rolled her eyes. "Because you're supposed to help. That's what family does." Family. The word stung like acid. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the people who had never once stood up for me. My mom's tears, my dad's silence, Claire's entitlement, it all blurred together. Then I finally said it. "No." The room froze. My mom's face twisted in disbelief, but I didn't stay to watch it. I walked out, shutting the door on the past. For the first time, I realized saying no could feel like freedom, and it broke me how long it took to learn that. In the days that followed, I felt both liberated and hollow. Saying no had given me peace, but it also left a trail of guilt that followed me everywhere, into work, into bed, into the mirror every morning. Years of conditioning don't vanish overnight. I kept replaying their faces in my head, my mom's trembling lip, my dad's silence, Claire's glare, but beneath the guilt was something new, relief. I didn't owe them anymore. I had already spent my entire life trying to prove my worth to people who only saw me when they needed something. So I decided to pour that energy into myself. I started therapy, something I'd always brushed off as too expensive, but realized was cheaper than another decade of emotional damage. My therapist, a quiet woman with kind eyes, asked me one question that stuck. What would your life look like if you stopped trying to be the good son? That question hit harder than any argument I'd ever had. For the first time, I started imagining a future that wasn't tied to their approval. Work became a refuge. I took on a new project, got promoted, and finally moved into a small house with a yard. It wasn't fancy, but it was mine. Every square foot earned by me, for me. I hung my art in the living room, not hidden in a box like when I lived under their roof. Sometimes I'd sit there with a cup of coffee, watching sunlight fall across the floor, and feel something I hadn't felt in years. Pride. But even peace has its ghosts. One evening, I found a letter in my mailbox. No return address, just my name in my mother's handwriting. Inside was a short note. "We're sorry for how things turned out. We just need a little help to get back on track. Love, Mom and Dad." No apology, no acknowledgement, just another ask. I stared at it for a long time, then folded it neatly and slid it into the trash. For once, I didn't feel guilty. Just done. Weeks passed without another word from them, and for the first time in my life, the silence felt like peace instead of punishment. I stopped checking my phone every few hours, waiting for a guilt-tripping text. I stopped rehearsing imaginary arguments in my head. My world finally felt quiet, clean. But the universe, as always, has a cruel way of testing resolve. I ran into my cousin at a friend's wedding. Between small talk and awkward family updates, he mentioned my parents. "They're living with Claire now," he said. "Things got really bad. They sold everything, their jewelry, the car, just to stay afloat." He paused, studying my reaction. "Your sister's not doing great. She's back to square one." I didn't say much, just nodded and changed the subject, but the words stuck with me the entire night. Part of me wanted to feel satisfaction. After all the years they dismissed me, karma was finally doing its work. But another part of me, the version still wired for compassion, couldn't help but ache a little. You can't unlearn empathy, even if the people who raised you never showed it to you. A week later, I quietly started sending grocery deliveries to their address. Nothing expensive, just basics. I didn't include a note or a name. It wasn't forgiveness, it was closure. I didn't want to see them suffer, but I also wasn't stepping back into their chaos. Sometimes at night I'd picture them opening those bags of food, wondering who sent them. Maybe they assumed it was a neighbor, or maybe, deep down, they knew. It didn't matter. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for the version of me that once begged for love and got silence instead. That version of me deserved peace, and I was finally learning how to give it to him. It had been nearly 6 months of silence when Claire showed up at my workplace. I was walking out of the building, coffee in hand, when I heard someone call my name. I turned, and there she was, disheveled, pale, standing beside a dented car that looked like it hadn't been washed in weeks. For a second, I thought she was there to apologize, maybe even make peace. But when she started talking, the same old tone crept back in. Guilt first, entitlement second. "Mom's not doing well," she said, crossing her arms like she was preparing for an argument. "Dad's tired. They want to see you. They want the family back together." I sighed, already feeling the walls closing in. "Claire, this isn't about family. It's about control. You all only show up when you need something." Her eyes flashed with irritation. "That's not fair. They love you, you know. They just didn't know how to show it." I laughed, a bitter sound that surprised even me. Didn't know how to show it? "Claire, they chose not to show it. They had decades to try," her voice broke. "You're being cold. You're not the only one who's hurting." I looked at her then. Really looked. The person who'd been their pride and joy, the golden child, now stood stripped of everything that made her feel special. For a fleeting moment I felt sorry for her, but sympathy isn't the same as forgiveness. "I'm done carrying this family," I said quietly. "You can keep pretending that everything was equal, that love was shared, but we both know the truth." "You got everything." I got silence. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't flinch. I just turned and started walking toward my car. Behind me, I heard her whisper, "You've changed." I stopped, looked back once and said, "No, Claire, I finally haven't." And with that, I left her standing in the parking lot, the same place where I'd finally left my old self behind, too. It's strange how peace doesn't arrive with fireworks or celebration. It just slips in quietly when you stop chasing things that hurt you. Months passed after that confrontation, and I didn't hear from any of them again. No more calls, no letters, no guilt-ridden visits. Just silence. And this time, it wasn't the heavy kind. It was clean, still, almost sacred. I spent my days working, painting again, and reconnecting with parts of myself I'd buried years ago. My therapist once told me, "Healing isn't about erasing pain. It's about reclaiming your story." And that's exactly what I did. I stopped defining myself by what I wasn't to them and started focusing on who I was to myself. I built friendships that felt like family, learned how to say no without apologizing, and even started teaching art classes on weekends. Watching others create without fear reminded me how far I'd come. Sometimes, though, old memories sneak in. Claire laughing as my parents praised her. My dad telling me to try harder. My mom pretending not to see me in the room. But instead of anger, I just feel distance. Like I'm watching a movie I've already seen too many times to care how it ends. Every so often, I'll get a tagged photo of my parents at a community event, smiling beside Claire. They look older, smaller, like time has finally caught up with the version of them I used to chase. And when I see those pictures, I don't feel rage or longing anymore. Just calm acceptance. I used to think closure came from getting an apology, from hearing them admit they were wrong. But now I know it's quieter than that. Closure isn't them changing. It's me not needing them to. They raised me to believe love had to be earned. But peace, I learned, doesn't ask for permission.